I know there'll be people still bouncing in here, but I just want to welcome everybody to Thursday, May 27th. It's end of the month already. Where's this year going? But we're excited. So this is Sue Peterson from the Michigan District of Kiwanis. As a couple of reminders, next week we are hosting the candidates for international trustee on Thursday night session. So we will do some more promotion. We'll send that information out. The week after, we are hosting the candidates for international vice president. And as those of us know in Kiwanis, the International Council, Wendy, will be voting this year because there's no real convention, so to say. It's just the education conference. So that'll happen when we go to Salt Lake City. It will be virtual for the council members who are the board of trustees and past presidents and a few other individuals that will vote. I think there's 91 votes that will be cast for the board. Then the third week of June, Mike Downs, if you want to come back and have some fun, Mike Downs is going to be with us the third week of June to talk about how convention is going to work to get us ready for being virtual or being in person. And then June 24th, as I've been telling everybody, it's going to be live from Salt Lake City. So those of you that are around are going to come visit us. And I've already talked to Bert West and Art Riley and said, you guys will need to stop by and see what we're doing that evening in Salt Lake City. So it's a Thursday night. I think there's a dinner or something or a party. We'll figure it out, but it'll be 5 o'clock out there. And then everybody else that isn't able to join us will be able to join us virtually. But tonight I'm very, very excited to have with us a good friend. We were just talking earlier about the last time we really spent any time together, but I have known Wendy for years. She's a member of the Kiwanis family. To give her a little bit about her bio, she mentors the collective wisdom in organizations by engaging talents and hearts of people, fosters and builds capacity by strengthening relationships and systems so groups and organizations thrive. Wendy has a Ph.D. and 3 master's degrees and creatively blends that to design fresh approaches grounded in research with a flair of humor that gets results for clients all over the world. She is the author of Trust Repair, It Is Possible. And I have the book. And I've read it. I read it when it first came out. And I'm actually reading it again, Wendy. And she cares deeply about helping people work together better. She teaches Lean Six Sigma Black Belt certification for anybody that's interested in Six Sigma. She's a consultant, a mentor, and a volunteer. And in the Kiwanis family, she has served in every level of Circle K, including, as I mentioned earlier, the 8990 International President. She has served as her Kiwanis Club president and currently is the Kiwanis advisor to one of her key clubs that they're her club sponsors. So Wendy truly understands the relationship of family and who we are and what we do. And Wendy, I'll be happy to let you know that the Lee family member is here with us. Margaret's here. So the entire fan club from Ohio, well, not Ohio State, but from Ohio State is here with you tonight. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Wendy and let her engage us in how to repair trust. Wendy, it's all yours.
Thanks, Sue. Welcome, everybody, and thanks for letting me join your Thursday learning experience. I think this forum is great. And my hope in our time together is to share with you a little bit about the research that I've done and the practice around repairing trust and strengthening trust. I just look at it that way in any group. I've used this on a neighbor with a tree issue. So you can use it at the individual level and at the interpersonal level. You can use it in groups, and it doesn't have to be, we could look at it like our Kiwanis Club. You could look at like a leadership group. You can look at it from, a volunteer larger system. So I think there's a lot of applicability and look forward to engaging with you around that tonight. So I've got that information and a handout that I will put into chat here shortly. So speaking of chat, what I would welcome is if you turn that function on your Zoom. And what I'd like for you each to do is to think about what trust, how would you define trust? And if there's maybe 1 or 2 behaviors that speak to you about that, write that and put it into chat. What does trust mean to you? These are great. I'm appreciating it. If you get a chance to look, do you see some patterns, right? There's some patterns emerging here. I love it. You know, what I learned, and just like in leadership, there's not one definition of what trust means. I'd like to share with you a working definition. And I say it's working because I got the first part of it from the Oxford Dictionary. And that part is trust is a belief in the character, ability, and reliability and intentions of others. And that's where that Oxford Dictionary definition stops. But in the work that I've done, in the research, and just in working with people, you know, trust is different. It's not so transactional, it's visceral. And so that willingness to risk vulnerability with them, I think really encapsulates the rest of it. So I use this as a working definition, and I hope that some of you, as you wrote your definitions into chat, that you can see some of what you're offering right here in this working definition. In my research, so I got interested. Well, let me do it this way. I'm going to go back and forth between screen share and then just having a conversation with you, if that's all right. What got me interested in this subject is, as a consultant and also someone who's been a lifelong member of groups, right? That when you're in a group and sometimes when things start to go sideways and you still need to work together, right? Sometimes groups were able to work through it and you can carry on. Other times we remain stuck and we don't operate well. People start to discount each other and it can spiral, and then you really lose all effectiveness. And, you know, we don't have, you know, we certainly don't want that to happen, right? So as a consultant, when I would get called in to work with groups and I would find out that they had trust issues, and I would design, I don't know, interventions and work and activities to help support them, with some groups it worked with and with others it didn't. So that became the essence of my study. And I invited people to be part of the study who could kind of describe experiences in both of those camps. Either they worked through it and they learned from that, or they worked through it and they learned it didn't work. But what can I learn by comparing and contrasting and learning from those stories? And from there, I created a model. And that's kind of, I'm going to share that in the second part of our time together. But post-doctoral work, I continued to interview people and talk with people and had additional interest in defining behaviors. And so this first part I want to offer to you as a way to diagnose. I think it's, you can look at this, and I kind of wish I had this when I was a first line supervisor a long time ago. I probably would have saved myself from some of my big mistakes. I think we all have to make mistakes, but I believe that it might have been helpful. And I actually have it to share with you in just a second. I'm going to put it into chat as well, and you can pull this handout down. It's just a reference document for what I'm going to cover. I've only told it like 3 times that I wanted to do that. Okay, is there a reason, Sue, that it may not want me to upload a document?
I just don't know why. If you want to email it to me,
Yeah, I'll email it.
I'll try to load it in, because
Okay.
it says there's a file available, but I don't know.
See, I see it going in there. This
Right.
is cyberspace. It's like, but I'm not going to share it with you. This Zoom needs some trust repair.
That's right.
Okay, I'll be happy to email that to
Yeah.
you in just a second. All right, so let me set this up as I share it with you while I'm talking and sharing with Sue. So there you go, Sue. It's on its way. 30-second tour. Now I'm going to share the screen again. Thank you for working with this. Okay, trust behaviors. If you think about it, there are behaviors that support strengthening relationships and strengthening organizations. And some of these begin at the purpose level, right? How clear are we about where we're going? Does the organization set up everybody for success by having clear boundaries and scope and priorities? Unknowingly, people can erode trust when you don't get clear about that, when you just say, well, everything's a priority. Well, if everything's a priority, you're going to frustrate people because I want to bring my best self to work and I've got all of this work and now we have a new priority and now how am I supposed to manage it, right? So there are purpose level behaviors. Why does a group exist? If there's anything fuzzy in that, we know it's going to affect the next layer of behaviors that we look at, and that's roles. People want to be clear about what is my role in supporting this purpose, and then what's the clarity about people who support and work with me in that. Again, if there's any fuzziness here, it's going to affect the rest of the system. How work gets done is next. Are we open to new ways of doing things? Is there clear roles and responsibilities in how these tasks get fulfilled? Then how people communicate is the next layer of behaviors that we look at. And then finally, how people treat each other. So just pause for a moment. When groups start to not get along well, sometimes what we feel the most is the interpersonal dynamics, how people are treating each other, right? But they may be mistreating each other because of something lower in the system, because maybe roles aren't very clear. And because the roles aren't very clear, some work products are not getting done. And because of that, you might be not inviting the right people to the meeting. And if you're not invited to the meeting, then I might be getting frustrated because I think that you're, purposely not keeping me, informed, right? So there's several things that can happen in a group. And I use this particular process to diagnose what might be happening. In my data, I found that there were some common trust violations. And in looking at it from this particular lens, I found that all of the folks in my study that gave me their stories, 18% of the stories contained violations in the purpose category. And so let me pause here for 1 second as well. Those of you that want things to add up to 100%, these numbers are not going to add up to 100%. And I'll tell you why. As I listened to someone share their trust story about what happened, I would listen to that and I would mark into certain categories where the trust violations were happening. So one story might have a trust violation in purpose. People were just not clear about the direction. And then they were changing core processes, and then people just were treating each other really badly. Maybe they told me a story like that. Well, I would have then marked a hash mark in the purpose category, one in core process, and one in interpersonal dynamics. So if that makes sense, it's like one trust story could have had violations in multiple categories. So with that, 36% of the stories contained violations in the roles category. 61% of the trust stories that I heard had violations in how work got done. 75% had to do with how people communicated, and decision-making is wrapped up in this particular one as well. And then the number, usually if we were together, I'd start asking what the percentages you think that might take place or what people feel, but 89% of the stories contained violations in how people treated each other. And that's just, that's why people, when trust is eroding, we have a tendency to not think about purpose level roles or core process. We have a tendency to think about the way people are communicating and treating each other. And so one of the first things I want to offer to you as leaders in the Kiwanis world, to think about the clubs or the projects that you're working on, and if there are things that aren't feeling right in terms of communication patterns or how people are treating each other, to pull back and say, where's the earliest place that this is starting? Okay. And so I want to, yeah, okay, I'm going to do this. That's what I'm going to do. So I wanted to just go over these just a little bit more. This is also part of the handout. And then after I share all these behaviors, I'll pause and kind of check in and see if there's any particular questions or dialogue that you want. And of course, Sue, you can stop me if there's a question that comes in along the way. So the behaviors that show up in the purpose category are, we need to align people and systems and resources for success and define that purpose and direction, scope, and boundaries. So not only does this matter for long-term organizations, certainly like at a Kiwanis club level, right? Or even the officers. How clear are people about, again, what's our purpose as a board? What's our purpose as a club? What's our purpose as a district set of leaders or international? And I think it's important, again, because unknowingly we can erode trust if we don't do this well, right? Is scope changing? And I mentioned the priorities because sometimes people just don't understand how important that is. We don't want to overwhelm the system, because if you give me too many priorities, I don't feel set up for success. Okay, purpose level. Next is roles, and there's several things that show up here. Have we established clear roles and responsibilities at an individual level? I think we do this well with our trainings. I think Kiwanis, and we do it with our SLP clubs. We really try to help set up people for success. And I would offer the question, do we just share it one way? So we, attend this, read these PowerPoints, here's your beautiful packet. How do we really know that people, are grasping that? And that's that second part of setting up people for success. I think we do really well with establishing the clear roles and responsibilities, and we create a lot of documentation and training around that. So I think that we have some really good things going on. At least that's been my experience. But there's other things that show up in the roles category that just aren't as directed by, larger bodies. I mean, are you setting up mutual expectations? And that word mutual is there intentionally. I would have to say that for me, I'm a work in progress in this one. I have a tendency to want to be of service. And so you need something from me, and yes, my answer is yes. And this person needed something from me, and I'd say yes. And I oversaid yes. And I was not meeting all the deadlines because I was trying to meet what I thought everybody wanted. And when I became aware that, because I was still trying to do my very best, but I was letting a few things slide, that I was unknowingly eroding trust between myself and someone else. And, for some people, it's one and done. If you let them down once, you're kind of off the island. There's for some people, the way they define trust and the way they experience trust, it's show me over time and then I will trust you. And for others, I'm going to give you trust first until you take it away. And for some folks, it could be several experiences. And while others, it might be one experience, right? So everybody has a different trust story and a different trust understanding. And I learned the hard way, and I learned that I had to be better at establishing mutual expectations. And of course, accountability. Just about everything you might see on this page, even the whole piece on, are we setting up people by delegating well? I've been to a full day training just on delegation, right? So when we think about some of these behaviors, I think it's really healthy to stop as, let's just say, as a Kiwanis club or as a project group or any particular group that you're a part of, and you bring these out and you ask the question, how are we doing? And I create a big, what I call plus delta. On one side of the sheet, I write down everything that's going well in these areas. Well, we think people have clear roles and responsibilities. That's awesome. And we're doing pretty good at honoring our agreements and commitments. But what we're not doing so well on, and the delta is a triangle, which just means change. What are the things that we need to adjust and change, alter, remedy to make things better? And it's a wonderful conversation to have with people. So I use this particular template to help me a lot with diagnosing where we're at. All right. The last thing I would just offer in this that was really interesting to me in my research, oops, dang it, sorry. In my research, when it came to breaking confidentiality, the folks had this way of describing why they did what they did. Those that broke confidentiality, and they just about everybody who told me their story had really good reasons why they did it. But there was impact on the larger group, that was part of the awareness that they were trying to do something and it affected the larger group. So I like to challenge groups and invite them to say, what needs to be confidential, right? Especially, and I'm talking about this mostly in a group setting. And I have some people come back and they say, well, there's always risk things and there's human resource issues. And I'm like, yeah, I understand that. But for the most part, ask yourself, why is this conversation needing to be confidential and what can we share with others? So that people who are in your group, they will feel that they can learn a little bit about what's happening, but they may not have all the details if there are things that have to be guarded confidentially. All right, so those are some of those behaviors that show up in the roles category. Next, how we get our work done. So you can either strengthen, improve trust if you are working to improve how we do things. You know, people don't want things to be stagnant, and you don't want processes that are antiquated because it frustrates people. So you can strengthen trust by improving operations. But I also wrote the word relationships. Remember, it's through people that we also get things done. So how are we working to improve that? Are we open to new ways of doing things? and it's pretty funny because sometimes I teach this. I teach people, Lean Six Sigma work on how to improve their work. And sometimes we're not open. I'm not open to new ways of doing things. I have a funny Kleenex story that I tell sometimes where in my kitchen, my husband, I had the Kleenex box in one spot in the kitchen. And one day it moved. It was on the other side. And I'm like, what's it doing over there? So I grab it and I put it back. And then the next day it had moved again. And I'm like, what's it doing over there? I go and I get that tissue box and I bring it back. Okay, now the third day it had moved over there. I was annoyed. I had reached my point like, okay, I know it's not moving itself. So I first asked my husband, I said, why are you moving it? Because it was him and it wasn't my kids. And his first answer was, well, because it makes more sense over there. And I said, well, I'm not sure I like that. And he kind of gave me the hand, kind of like, well, just kind of deal with it. Now, that annoyed me. So, wait a second. And then I had to pull out my own skills here and say, okay, help me understand why you think it makes more sense to be on the other side of the kitchen. Because I'm thinking of it from this perspective. I'm the one that uses the tissue 90% of the time, right? So I'm the one touching the process. It's my process, and somebody else moved it without kind of talking to me about it. But he did say, he goes, well, now it's closer to the sink and the garbage where you use it and you can throw it away and wash your hands. Okay, I know that makes sense. But for me, I felt annoyed because I wasn't included in the process. And then when I first asked about it, I kind of got the hand because he had felt like, well, we had kind of made it. I know it makes sense. And I did have some people go, well, Wendy, just buy a second box of Kleenex, put it where you want. Okay, there's solutions everywhere. We can do that. But here's the thing. People don't like someone else coming and making changes in their process without engaging them. And that's why that third bullet piece is there. Are we engaging people? Are we broadening decision-making? Are we asking for input? And we just have to make sure that you are inviting people with the right questions, because we want to ask for input, but you've got to help people understand where their input is going to be used and what level of decision-making is a part of that. All right. Okay. Communication, as you can imagine, there's lots of behaviors that support healthy trust. Listening to people, listening without judgment or without interruption. How to check in on things. Do we do that well? Right? Or we just kind of run off and assume we know what's happening? Are we checking for mutual understanding? Are we seeking feedback? Are we seeking new perspectives. I like the term sound and current information, sound and current data, because sometimes we operate on old data. So is it sound? If you have one member come to you concerned about a process, is that sound? Maybe it could be for that process, or maybe you need several members to express a certain experience around a process. Maybe you need several data points to tell you that you should do something. I mean, it all depends, but seeking that will be important. Are we sharing timely information? And are we fostering curiosity? Are we inviting people to challenge our thinking? I think that's healthy. You guys are doing great. I'm going to finish these last 2 slides and then we're going to talk. At least see the behaviors. So the last ones, this is about how people treat each other. Are we intentionally working towards strengthening relationships and connectivity? Are we investing that time and resources? Are we working to build each other up rather than gossip? And are we respecting each unique person, their perspective, their style? Are we inclusive? Are we welcoming? Are we investing in people in terms of their growth and development? Modeling high standards, integrity. People watch you 24/7, right? And vulnerability. And then here's a piece that really matters in trust, is we need to acknowledge our part. Are we acknowledging mistakes? Are we acknowledging that we have impact on others? And then sincerely apologize. I find it interesting that sometimes we're just at a place where for some folks, they don't feel comfortable acknowledging their part. It's easier to blame others or blame the system. And I found that it makes a difference. You can actually watch people's bodies when you say, yeah, I told you I would get you that report on Friday, but I didn't get it to you till Monday. And I'm really sorry about that. And, just acknowledge that must have really set you back, and just when you watch someone feel that, you could just watch their body go, like, thank you for recognizing that you had an impact. So these trust behaviors, these ones, I use this again in asking people questions so that I can learn at the lowest level where the trust issues might be, and then help the group think about remedies to repair that. I've got the rest of the model that I'll talk about in a minute, but I wanted to pause and just kind of show that to you right there and see what's emerging for you, if there are any particular questions, or if you see applicability with groups that you're a part of and using this.
This is Greg. I have a question. I can see where this could apply in 2 different situations. One is an event that you're doing, like a one-time event, but the other is ongoing as a group, a club, like a Kiwanis club, okay? So my specific question is, one of the things that we've always had some trouble with in Kiwanis is we attract new members who are joining a group, and we don't know them, they don't know us, so we've got to build that trust. And a lot of times we don't do a very good job of retaining those new members. And so what are some of the areas we can focus on in this model to help us integrate those new members into the club and retain them by building those trust factors?
Yeah, that's a great question, Greg. And it's one that I would welcome hearing from a variety of people on. But for me, I mean, each person joins, for their reasons. And if they're choosing to leave, what data are we gathering around their choices? What's contributing to their satisfaction in staying, and what's contributing to them leaving? And I don't know if we do a very good job of collecting that data, because then we can use that. So let's just say I joined, but I'm just hanging out in the crowd. I don't feel like I have a clear role. Maybe I don't know how to get involved. What are there's some Kiwanis clubs that have work process, they have processes in place for people to be involved in certain projects. Oh, but that's Greg's project, and this one's, Lori's project. And, people want to come in, and I first want to feel like I matter, and I wonder about that. There might be lots of data that you can collect from people leaving. I mean, what do you all think? See, that's a huge question, but I would use this. in terms of asking myself a variety of questions in talking with somebody.
Well, I guess I was wondering where it starts to break down. For instance, purpose. Do we not do a good enough job of explaining our purpose as a club, or is the purpose somehow different than what the objects of Kiwanis are? Because we show them. I don't know. There is, and then the roles. I mean, I'm it seems like there's some basic stuff that should be in place all the time for a club to be successful. And where should we start in terms of making sure that that's proper? We're doing it well.
So everyone is welcome. I just want to say, Wendy, everybody's welcome to open up their mics if you want to do that instead of, make it a conversation.
Yeah. As you guys are letting some of your idea, Alan, you've got something you were going to offer?
Are we giving new members a sense of belonging? And sometimes I don't even know what that means. Because sometimes it's easier to give some people that are maybe more outgoing than others that sense of belonging because they're ready to jump into things, as opposed to somebody that's sitting in the back table and is trying to get a sense of things first.
Yeah. Yeah, and be really intentional about that, right? There's some clubs that develop patterns. I know in my club, people sit in the same places. And so you invite someone new. What does that look like for someone new trying to break into some of those circles? Yeah, and I think that our club is having some conversations about, we're feeling really spread thin. We need new members. And, some are suggesting, well, do we become a single focus club or a single project focused club? I mean, that's one way of looking at it at the purpose level. Do you do that? Well, if you do that, then what's the impact? Well, then there are other things that we've been doing for the years. You say what to? Do we say no, or do we find another community organization to put it to? And if it's only a single focus club, well, what if some people join because I like being able to do a variety of things that fit my family or my time or my preference? Yeah.
And one day I was looking at the framework that you mentioned earlier, and I think about the questions: why the group exists, who does what function, how the work gets done, how the people share information, and how people interact. And I think if we look at the bullet points that were underneath one of those slides, it's very, determine our purpose, our direction, our priorities, establish our roles, our goals. So I think it goes back to, we all know why we belong or why we joined, but taking a look back and going, okay, how are we setting people up for success? How are we delegating? How are we honoring agreements? And I think it goes back to, what do you expect of me as a member? We talk about what do we expect of them as a member, and what can they expect from me as a club? And I'm looking at these questions going, wow, this really follows a good pattern and a good platform of things that we should be thinking about as an organization. Are we sharing timely information? And I will say that I know in my club, there are still members that are thinking about Kiwanis 20 years ago. And so remember what happened 20 years ago, but it's not timely. It may have been sound then, it's not sound now. But as I reread these things, I'm like, wow, this is really a great format for clubs to work through. And if you want to talk about, just to do some strategy work.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing I was just thinking about is if in our club, 89% of the people think the interpersonal dynamics are horrible, and 75% the communication doesn't exist. I mean, why would somebody want to join that club? Because it'd be pretty evident that it's pretty dysfunctional. And I'm wondering if instead of doing a member satisfaction survey, we do something like this instead to see how they feel about what's going on with the club, rather than are we focused on the right project? Are we focused, because that's external to the club as opposed to the internal dynamics of what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah, I think those are good questions. I think getting better at asking the right questions can be really useful. What strikes me, a couple of times I think I've had some missed opportunities in my own club where they send out a survey. They've done that a couple times this year, just really trying to find the right time since we've been virtual, you know, to find the right time of day to meet, since we're not stuck at 7 a.m. anymore. I'm just not a morning person. I just like, I don't have a desire to do that. But to me, they're not asking the right question. See, I've been, you know, I tend to the Key Club leadership needs. I volunteer for things because I pay attention to the bulletin, but I have no desire to go and listen to programs. And that's part of an old paradigm that several members of my club really enjoy. And while that's okay, when I'm told like, well, you're just a paper member, I'm like, well, no, I'm actually putting in a lot of service hours, you know, it just looks different, but I care about what we do, but don't judge me for not coming to the meetings, because what I'm doing with my life right now and the kind of consulting that I do, it's all day things. I can't stop, you know, it's just different. And I think we make some assumptions about why people go and stay. And I think that we should just invite, what's our question? Is the question what brings people to us and what would bring the most value and why would you want to be a part of it? Or what time of the day do you want to meet? I think the time of day is a secondary, third, fourth, fifth question maybe you ask. Yeah. So here's another, what I might offer is the second part to this is that if you find yourself in a space where we need to do some repair, that it could be, again, like I mentioned, I use this, the next part of the model with a neighbor over a tree issue. I'm working with, you know, I did an entire 100% virtual group during this pandemic, a team of 7 people that were struggling with trust. And we worked through the repair model during that time. And I'm really happy to say that they made a difference. So I wanted to share that with you. And it's not meant, you know, it's, again, research-based. It's a model that I think a lot of things can feed into. And if it's useful to you, great. So here it is. It's the second page of your handout. Okay, so when you find that you are in a space where something has happened, and it could be one major violation, betrayal, or it could be a series of things over time where people just kind of said, fine, you know, we just don't have trust here. So this is the suggestion that we, sorry, my dog's drinking in the background, that there's a reflect phase, and I'm going to go through each one of these. There's a reflect phase, an understand phase, a repair phase, and evolve. Okay. And for those of you that like to know what theoretical bases inform it, I don't know, I geek out at these kinds of things. There's all kinds of skills and knowledge base areas that inform and build upon each other. So I think about systems thinking, I think about adult development, I think about personality, and over, you know, human development support systems. So there's all kinds of stuff. Okay, anyway, we're not going to mess around with that. I just wanted to let you know that that's kind of my thinking. I gave you a small glimpse into my brain that there's a lot of things that support this. All right, something has just happened. The first step is for you to kind of go inside and reflect and think about what happened. I like to say, you know, interview your feelings. Why am I feeling this way? You know, what bothers me the most? Have I had this experience before, right? You know, so if one of you told me to just relax, I might get really annoyed because that word is a trigger word in my family. You know, to say the word relax did not meet the definition of what relax means. It kind of basically, in my family, it would basically say, what you're saying isn't okay for you to continue. So just relax. It's basically trying to silence somebody. Well, if I had that from a colleague and they told me to relax and I jumped from that and got upset, you know, after doing my reflection, I was like, you know what, that's about me. You know, sometimes we're triggered by things and it really is my story. So after your reflection, and just think, okay, it's about me, but maybe it's about someone else. And we need to think in these moments when we have trust issues, there's a personal impact to it, right? Unresolved trust over time will start to affect our physical health, our emotional health. It's going to affect, how you get your work done. Okay. So there's a personal cost of unresolved trust. So all of this is happening in my reflect phase. I'm thinking about that, thinking what happened, why is it bothering me? And then what's the cost right now? Right. But then the second phase, and this is broken up into 3 parts, I need to think about what is my contribution to this? People have a tendency to first think about what others did. Well, when you did this and that person did that, or sometimes when you didn't do this, you caused the trust issues. Well, we all play a part in the time when trust is either, strengthened or erodes. And so even though you think you might not be playing, you might think it's only the others, you are playing, you are doing something, right? So you got to think about what's your contribution, what are the others' contributions? And finally, there are things happening in what I just call the rest of the system. So maybe you're getting pressure from leaders to get something done, right? On your team. That outside pressure is contributing to the system, because sometimes when people are under pressure, they might be a little crankier and my quality of work might go down, and that can lead to trust violations. So it's an important part to stop and think about that. So this whole reflect phase, the whole idea of this one, and take as long as you need, but at the end of doing part 1 and part 2 of all of this is, do I need to work through and repair trust with someone else, right? Do I need to do that at the individual level, or do I need to do that at the group level? And there are also group costs and organizational costs to unresolved trust, right? Customer satisfaction. And, here we might call it member retention in our Kiwanis, right? Then there's risks involved. It might affect our finances, but definitely it affects how people, experience it. So group morale, right? And again, how we get our work done. So those should also be a part of the equation in your thinking. So let's say you've decided after that whole reflect phase, it's like, okay, if the answer is this is just about me doing the work, then I should continue doing the work alone. Okay. But if I come back and say, this is something that I really believe that there's enough cost and it's impeding how I'm working with others. So I do need to go forward and do something intentional about repairing trust with the group or another person. The next phase, and this is unlike other things that you've been taught, right? You got to find out what happened. The key in this is to make sure that you leave enough time to engage in a point where you hear somebody and you acknowledge your part. And then we apologize. And I think I've got, no, I don't. So let me pause right there for just a second. Dang it. I wanted to share with you that there's some really cool stuff on an apology. And an apology needs 3 things. It needs acknowledgement. It needs for you to talk about what is it going to take to make it right. And then the third part is, what are you going to do different to avoid happening, so letting it happen again in the future. Okay, so first is acknowledgement. You got to acknowledge your part. You got to acknowledge that whether it was intentional or not, pain happened somewhere. You let someone down. So let's go back to that one example where if I promised to get you a report on Friday, but I didn't get it to you till Monday, I have to acknowledge that I did that. You're right. I missed that deadline. And second, to make it right, what can I do right now to help you make it right? Maybe it's backed you up to try to get your work done. So how can I help you in any way? And third, I need to talk with you about what am I going to do different so that it doesn't happen again. So the likelihood of that apology going forward goes up. If we don't have those things, if someone just says sorry, or like my husband, like the hand, but no, he's not that sassy. I'm just kind of exaggerating, but you get the idea. When you don't feel really heard, it matters. So this particular piece, this understand phase, is a conversation. It's actually a dialogue. It's not a discussion where you're just sharing facts. It's not a debate where you're trying to say, well, that didn't happen, or you shouldn't feel that way. It's really dialogue where I am sitting here and trying to let something new in. I'm trying to understand what the impact was on you. And then I really need you to hear what the impact was. And together we're creating some new learning in that. right? So, and during this phase should take as long as it needs. I think we rush through it. I don't think people go deep enough if it's really bothered somebody. And while you're doing this well, you can be learning like, oh, you know, during this understand phase, this is going to be what we need in the prepare phase, because I'm going to learn from you like, oh, we weren't very clear about what we were supposed to be doing. So I'm making a note. Okay, maybe, and you know, a next activity is we're going to need to clarify a team charter and help ourselves get clear about roles and responsibilities. And maybe as we're talking in the understand phase, I might learn that, you know, I think our personalities are doing this. Maybe we just need a personality instrument to learn a little bit more about how different people do things. Great. That can be something in the repair phase. We can do, there's a number of instruments. You know, maybe people just need to get to know each other a little more. You know, you talked earlier, Alan, about connectivity and belonging. And we can see that clearly in the understand phase. It's like, oh, this person is really feeling like they're isolated and no one's connecting with them. And it hurts. Okay, then we can do some really deliberate things. So there's a relationship between what you find out in understand that then you need to do something about. And I'll say this, and then we'll open it up for questions. Sometimes trust repair can happen in just these first two phases. Sometimes it just takes really good listening and understanding and recognizing our part, and sometimes that works. And sometimes in that process, you learn that you need to do some things different, or we need some learning together. Then go and make that happen. I found in my research that if there were things that you found in the understand phase, but you didn't necessarily do anything about it, you're gonna lose trust. You might have talked about it, but if you recognize that there's something that needs to be done and then you don't create a way to do that, it erodes trust. And then that last phase is just called evolve. We got to let people grow. You know, we can't hold each other hostage to the time in which we made a mistake or let someone down, right? I don't want to constantly be on trial, you know, like waiting, my colleagues waiting for me to mess up that report again. And there are people that play the gotcha game. They wait long enough so that they can say, see, Wendy, you did it again. And that's not helpful either. So they're all phases. They shouldn't be done in a day, you know. And anyway, that's 14 years worth of my work all in 45 minutes. So there's a lot to it, but I'm happy to kind of talk more with you and enjoy some questions.
Well, Wendy, I will thank you and let everybody know that you're welcome to unmute if you've got questions or thoughts. And I did write the information down about the apology, you know, the acknowledgement, what's going to take to make it right. And I agree with you. There are times oh, I'm sorry, you know, and you just kind of let it go. You know, you don't think about it, but the fact that it is a dialogue, and it'll be just as uncomfortable for you as it will be for other people, right? Because if you start to talk to them, they're going to be like, well, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? You know,
there's a question that was a direct message to me. It says, what happens if the other person does not want to engage? That's a really powerful question. And I want to offer a couple thoughts to that because it's true. So sometimes it's timing. You know, sometimes, remember, when we all have emotional spikes, when something happens and you feel your emotions spike, my cognitive, my ability to sort through things and do things goes down, right? Because we've triggered our fight or flight symptom. So one, we might need time. Second, people's maturity levels don't always match their age, and they may not be ready to have a conversation about contributing to the erosion of trust because it's easier to blame you. And as much logic and approach and process as you want to bring this, you still may not be able to penetrate that, right? And third, you know, there are some people with different abilities in the world, you know, people on the spectrum or others that, you know, that's not, I didn't study that as much. I just know that plays a part. And so there might be several things that it may not be the right time for people. But if you find that somebody else doesn't want to engage, I wrote a chapter about it in the book. There are some things that you can still do to help yourself work through the process, your own reflection, maybe your process of trying, maybe write a letter, but you don't send it. I mean, there's some ritual things that you can do to help yourself release what you can and try to learn what you can, and leave it at that. I don't have all the answers for that, but I am sensitive to that, because there are times when I have wanted to engage with people and it wasn't the right time for them. And maybe at some point in the future, it might be. Yeah. Jerry, you have a question.
We'll just wait for her to unmute herself. I think she's trying.
There we go.
Thank you. All of this has been excellent.
Mhm.
Now, I had a situation that nobody thought I was going to show up yesterday to the number ones, Kiwanis and all the clubs, because I kind of was a little upset because I didn't think where we were going was representing Detroit number one. And we were outnumbered by all the other clubs in number one. And I had a few obstacles, and they knew I did, because parking was horrendous and they thought I wasn't coming. But it seemed like every step I moved, I got closer, and the door kept opening until I got there. And they said, we didn't think we were going to see you because we know how you felt about so and so and so and so. And so today, when we got to the warehouse, this is Detroit number one, and she asked me, she says, did you stay to the end? I said, yeah, I did. I said, I was having so much fun. So sometimes you just have to get where you're going, even when you object to how it went down, and have fun when you get there. And I just want to say it was successful, and what I said was true, and the person confirmed it. Now that made me feel good. The statement I made, she said, you were right about what you said. I said, I know I was. I said, but there was no reason not to support Kiwanis. And that's what I found out.
Mhm.
Just sharing.
Thanks,
Any
Jerry.
comments, Wendy?
Well, I'm not sure what you'd like me to comment on. It sounds like it worked out for you. You know, sometimes you got to let people, you know, sometimes you don't have to take the bait. If I'm understanding correctly, right? You just kind of kept going and say it all worked out.
It all worked out, but then the statement that I had made about what was going on, another person confirmed to me that I was right.
Yeah.
And I told her I knew I was, and that was the reason why I wasn't going to participate. But because the doors kept opening up, I got there, and it was very successful, and I was happy.
Good.
But I almost didn't go because of everything that was going on around me. And that's like, I'm not a new member, but that's like why new members don't really join in, because it's like they don't feel a part of it. Their suggestions are not accepted.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what was going on. But it's
Yeah,
all good. So the attitude is, it's all good.
it is. Well, I mean, all of that contributes to creating a welcoming environment, right? Yeah, people need that. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you. I'm going to mute myself back.
Okay. Any other questions? Or I guess it's at that hour. So I don't know if you wanted to engage anymore.
I have one other question, I guess. How do you deal with this from a leadership end of it, right? It's, you know, we talked a little bit beforehand, but if it's a trust issue with a leader, you know, if it's a trust issue with someone that your supervisor, or, you know, how do you take that step, you know, to make the first step?
Yeah. Well, one of the ways to, again, here's a couple of answers, but it's not supposed to be the answer. You know, I try to find out what does the leader pay attention to? So if the leader pays attention to data, and a fair amount of them do, they're held accountable for results, then I might offer, you know, I might ask a couple questions like, well, what are you noticing in the group I think our productivity is down and people aren't really talking very well. And are you noticing that? And I think that there's something going on. And I think, if we want to get to your level, there's, people can tune into data sometimes. And so if that's their thing, then I might offer that. And that's why there's always costs to unresolved trust at the personal level and at the organizational level. So that might suit them. Others might be like, when I think of Kiwanis members, we care deeply about making a difference in our community and being of service. So I might then have a conversation about tying to that and say, I'm not sure we're going to be as impactful as we can be because we're just not communicating and working well. Do you notice that too? Can we talk about that? So there's a way to kind of get people into whatever matters to them that I might be able to get them to tune into me a little bit more. Sometimes I use like that trust behaviors framework that I gave you. I put that into a Google form. And I said, hey, can we send this out to folks? And then they get data back on, oh, look, there's a problem. So, there's a few ways of doing that.
And those are great questions, right? That you may not think about as you're looking at this. What is important to that other person? To some of our members, it is the impact. To some of them, it may be the recognition, but it's finding out who they are and what their importance is.
Yeah.
Everybody's really deep in thought. I can see it.
Or it's dinner time and they're thinking of that too.
No, for some of these people, it's bedtime.
Oh, okay.
Anybody have any other thoughts or comments? I know my mind's processing. I'm sure that some of our other friends, Larry, Lanton, Brad's with us.
So at one point when I was on staff, we did a book club and we read Covey's Speed of Trust.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I believe that unfortunately hinders us as an organization overall is there is a lack of trust within Kiwanis International. And I've seen it having been on staff, but also a member and been in the field where clubs and club leaders and district leaders don't trust Kiwanis International. And I will tell you that having been a staff member and listened to other staff members don't trust Kiwanis leaders and Kiwanis members. And so and that's why I think sometimes we are where we are as an organization. And I know people probably don't want to hear that, but I really do believe that that's one of our challenges as an organization. And I don't necessarily have the answer on how to overcome it. I think these are great things and tools that we can use. They're probably much easier to do within our own clubs.
Mm-hmm.
But when you start to try and do that up the levels, I think that's a little more challenging. I don't know, Wendy, what do you think?
Yeah, I actually have an organizational model that I've been playing with. That's not been studied as much. A fair amount of the trust repair work studied at the organizational level and in scholarly articles have to do when an organization has messed up with their customers or in their community. Like a product recall, for example, right? And they have to reestablish trust with people outside their organization. There's not as much data on how to manage if you've got systemic trust issues within a larger system, within a larger organization. So I've been taking their model and I've been adapting it to apply at the inside the organization. So yeah, it's interesting, Lanton. Again, I think of multiple things like the data and first there's belief systems. Do we believe that people, several layers up in the organization really understand us and are leading us well? Do people up here believe that people down on the floor or in the Kiwanis clubs, are they, do we believe that they're capable? it's interesting because those beliefs can start to lead people into how they do things. I don't know if I recall when I was, Circle K was a little different, right? There were only 10,000 members. We had the ability to touch more members than Kiwanis or Key Club could do. But even then, it's like when you're making policy and you're saying, oh, I think this would be great resources for them. We're creating things, but what data is telling us that they really wanted that? There's this benevolence, like, well, we know better, we can help you. And I think that we get that experience. It's all good intentioned, but sometimes there might be a disconnect because people on the ground might be saying, yeah, now you want all these monthly reports and you want all this data, but what do you want the data for? We never hear what you need the data for. You're just taking data from us and you want this, and awards are built on this. And you're like, good grief, there's a lot of things at play. Yeah.
I tend to agree with Lanton. I think that part of it is just the way that we're organized, and it's perhaps because at KI we run pretty lean and mean with a small staff for all the things that we're trying to take on, but we operate in silos. And so it's not so much trust as much as just misinformation or not knowing where to get, some of the answers and not knowing what one another is doing. And I think that having served as Lieutenant Governor, I always knew that dealing with volunteer leaders in particular, you have home lives, you have work lives, you have, all sorts of things pulling at you, other civic engagements and all. And so accountability, I always knew was paramount. But the thing that I learned the most about being a lieutenant governor was the fact that we really need more consistency. And a lot of that stems from just the way that we're set up with king or queen for a day at the club level or at the district or at the international level of, changing leaders every year. And just not having that consistency, or, I'll take it with my lieutenant governor, you'll have a year or two of where a lieutenant governor won't have any division council meetings and pretty much doesn't even make visits and doesn't do much. And then you'll have somebody like me that comes along that really wants to make it happen. And people are like, why in the hell are you doing this now? We got a long okay without anybody getting in our business for a while and everything. And so it's that consistency that is really missing. And lastly, I hope that maybe in 2024, when we have the 100th anniversary of the 6 objects, that perhaps our Kiwanians will be more cognizant of how those are pretty good guiding principles that have stood up for 100 years. And perhaps we need to recite those more than our defining statement or some of the other things that we tend to revere.
Yeah, good point. There's something, again, sometimes we get focused on the things that aren't going well. I think we all kind of know that. And the more we remind ourselves about what draws us together, getting back to Alan's point, that belonging, but that connection, Bradford, that you were just sharing, connecting to the objects, it's a beautiful thing. It's inspiring. I think we need a lot more of that. It kind of I'm ready to just kind of be more on the hope and optimistic side of things, not to discount paying attention to everything, but reminding us of that is a really healthy thing.
Wendy, I want to thank you for being with us tonight. Great conversation, and you can tell that the work that you put into this and the research is just amazing. And I know as I'm sitting here going, okay, I told you I had started the book again. I'm going to go back to it now and think of it from a different perspective of looking at, how working with, our clubs, and how can we take a look at those beliefs and take a look at, the purpose and bring it back to that, maybe that, how can we do that as an organization in our clubs, and maybe eventually have a further session on that down the road sometime. But I will go ahead and stop our recording for now, but thank Wendy for being with us. Thanks it's been great to catch up with you and to see everyone here. And I will leave the room open for a little while if anybody wants to continue to chat, but otherwise we will see you next week for our candidates open forum. So with that,